All right, it's a hot button one here today. We are talking about the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, the right to bear arms. Again, it's always a hot button issue here in the United States of America. What we're looking to do today is look at this simply as far as what was the intent of the Second Amendment at the time it was passed and why was it passed. I'm not going to get into the numerous court cases over the years which have ruled in different ways as far as what does the right to bear arms mean. We're not going to get into that today. This is just strictly the history of the Second Amendment and a broad overview of what it means. And I think, first of all, we should just start out by reading word for word what was written by the Founding Fathers in the United States Constitution. And it's a very short one, which can help you understand why there's so much debate on the Second Amendment today. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution reads, quote, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So the history of the Second Amendment and why it was passed goes back to this debate that they were having at the Constitutional Convention between the Federalists, who wanted a stronger federal government, and the Anti-Federalists, who were more suspect of having a stronger national government. Now, the prior system of government that we had here in the United States, which was under the Articles of Confederation, established a government that most everyone agreed in the end just was not strong enough. It was a certainty that we needed a federal government stronger than what was established under the Articles of Confederation. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government did not even have the ability to raise an army federally, to have a professional federal military. So it was left up to the states. So in order to defend, if against any kind of uprising, you needed an armed militia at the state level. They had state militias, they had county militias. And so when you look at the Second Amendment, clearly they wanted to make sure that the people had arms so that they could partake in these militias. That's why the early portion of this amendment talks about how a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state. Another motivation for this was that the Anti-Federalists, as I said, were a little leery of having a federal government that was too powerful. And so they wanted to make sure that these militias could defend themselves against a federal government that got out of control, a federal government that was too powerful. Because throughout the history of the world, you did have situations where a federal military or a national military was used to trample upon the rights of the individuals. Just look to the early colonial revolution moments, where the British soldiers were here in the American colonies. The people here did not like that, and they looked at the soldiers as instruments of tyranny. And so with the Second Amendment, they wanted to make sure that the people themselves could defend themselves in that type of a situation. Historically, this was the reason for the Second Amendment. And standing armies historically had been used for when one country went to war with another country, and militias were used for everything else. So they're balancing this idea of having on one hand militias and on the other hand a federal standing army where, roughly they were equivalent. They had the same weapons. This is the background of the Second Amendment. So there's basically two competing interpretations of the Second Amendment today. The first one is the individual rights theory, which very much emphasizes the second half of the Second Amendment and the way that it closes by saying, again, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So to the individual rights theory on this, it's pretty clear, cut and dry. Look, the amendment says the rights of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. Regardless, on this side of the argument, regardless of what style of weapon it is. They would view gun control as unconstitutional. At the same time, the other side looks at what is called the collective rights theory, and they emphasize the first half of the amendment where it talks about a well-regulated militia And they are emphasizing that, look, this is about militias at the founding of the country, and it really doesn't go any further than that. We needed, as I explained earlier, historically speaking, armed militias around the country. The theory here is that the founders were really only intending to restrict Congress from regulating the ability of states to arm themselves at that militia level. Again, the idea of the day that a federal government could grow to become oppressive and the states needed to be able to defend themselves should that happen. In sum, they didn't want the National Congress to be able to infringe upon a state's right to defend themselves. And in order to defend themselves, they needed a militia, and they needed the people to be able to arm themselves to be part of that militia. So there you have it, the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.